Hi folks, welcome to the channel. In this video I'm going to be introducing a product that I've never used before on the channel, and that is Gilded asphaltum, or otherwise known as Brunswick Black. So don't be fooled in thinking this is just another paint. This has got a myriad of uses, all of which I will cover in this video, but the main thing I'm going to be focusing on is its use in acid etching. So a little while ago, a friend of mine had a little baby girl and is long overdue a gift from me. So I'm going to use this opportunity to make a lovely acid etch panel for her. This will be one of the key materials that I use. So before we get into that, just want to say a massive thank you to everyone who's supported and following since I've come back, and especially everyone who's donated to help me support the channel. I am self-funding, I put everything back into the channel, so every little bit really helps. But anyway, other than that, let's crack on with it. Right, so that's my glass prepped for stage one, and you might notice I didn't weed the entire design out. That's because this is going to be kind of a multi-stage process. So I've weeded a part of the design, I've covered the back of this bit of glass in vinyl, and that's because when you're acid etching, even the fumes can etch the glass, so if you don't cover the underside, there's a chance that you'll get sort of undesirable results. So what I'll be using is a 24% hydrofluoric acid mix with, for the first phase, mica 500. So mica is an aggregate that's acid resistant, and when it's mixed with the acid and it sits on the glass, the coarseness of the mica is what creates the kind of stippled pattern. 500 is a sort of medium to low grit, so it's going to be a really fine sort of stippled pattern. So I'm not going to do this as an acid etching tutorial for a couple of reasons. Firstly, hydrofluoric acid, goes without saying, is just so dangerous, but it's also something that the general public can't buy. So yeah, for that reason I'm not going to do it as a tutorial. But secondly, I have done a substitute process where you can use a substance called Armor Etch that you can get off Amazon. You can mix that with water and mica and you can get a very similar result. So I'm going to put a link to that up here, and I'll put a link in the description. So anyway, I'm going to put all my safety gear on, and then I'll do the sort of prep bit as a time lapse, and then we'll come back and have a look at the results of that first etch. Okay, so I'm not sure how clear that is on the video, and also apologies if there's a sort of whirring sound, the dishwasher's on behind me. But this has now got a really nice fine stippled effect, and again, I hope this is visible, but I'm going to now paint over that stippled effect with my Brunswick Black. When I do that, I'm going to be careful not to just slap it on there, because I need to preserve the next bit of the pattern, which I'm going to remove. Because the thing about this paint is it's acid resistant. So once this is on, and then I remove the remaining bits of the design, I can then acid etch this with a different grade of mica. So you can get a really nice kind of different effect, different sort of sparkles on your panel. So just doing that quite carefully, but I mean the sort of bits in between the pattern are relatively big, so I haven't got to be too accurate. But earlier on in the video I said it's something that has a kind of multitude of uses, and so one of them is glue chipping. And back when I did my first ever glue chip piece, I was following instructions on the internet, and the only things I could find were like really old, almost Victorian instructions. And the way they used to use this is, because this is oil based, and when you glue chip in, obviously the glue is water based. This is what they'd use as a kind of barrier so that the glue didn't go over onto the areas of the glass you didn't want it to. So what I did is I painted the whole bit of glass, put my vinyl design on it, then sandblasted it, then took the vinyl off. So what I was left with was etched glass, and the bits that weren't etched were covered in asphaltum. And when you pour the glue on, the glue sort of makes tracks down into the, well, it repels the water-based glue to a point. You know, you're not going to be able to pour an absolute load of it on there, but if you're pouring it gently, it will, yeah, repel that glue. So that's a really, really cool thing if you wanted to give that a go and do things the traditional way. That is how they used to do it. I've also been told that this is really good for backing up a silvered mirror. So that's another thing. You know, I did a video earlier on a few years ago about how to silver a mirror, and really what I covered for backing up was pathetic. You know, I just said use spray paint, and I had no sort of knowledge as to whether or not that would hold out. But a lot of people commented on the video and said that using asphaltum is really quite a good thing for that. So I am passing this on as second-hand information, but yeah, that's another thing. So in terms of its multitude of uses, I mean, it's acid resistant, it's handy for glue chipping, and it's good for backing up. So, and it's a really rich, nice black paint. So anyway, I'll do the rest as a time lapse, and then we'll move on to the next level of acid etching. Right, so now we're on to the last bit of the weeding, and that is for the name, which is Nova, and I'm just going to pluck those last little bits out, ready to do a bit of painting, and I'm going to use this as a stencil. So this, I have covered this process before in a couple of videos, but I will cover it now rather than referring you to another one. And it all depends on your skill level as to whether or not you choose to do things this way. So I set up this channel for people who never done anything like this before, who maybe, you know, didn't feel confident with things like painting and things like that. So, you know, I generally use those sort of techniques on here, whereas since I've started, there are a lot of people in our Facebook groups who are sort of experienced sign painters, and they would never do things like this. You know, this is a sacrilege probably, you know, because it's with their trade, it's all about, you know, hand painting stuff and the sort of brush craft and the skill and the control, and you know, that is a skill in itself, and it's a skill I don't have, you know. So I mean, I am doing this so that I can show anyone how to do it, but I'm also doing this because I can't do the other way. You know, I'm not very good at sign painting, I haven't got very good brush control, so I have to do things this way, but it works for me, you know, and each their own, you know, whichever way you prefer to do it. But really what I'm doing is I'm pulling out the bits that I'm then going to paint, and I'll use that as a mask, and then as I'm painting I'm going to be removing that mask, because what the paints I use will be enamels, and they don't dry quickly, but they do go quite tacky quite quickly, and you want to kind of remove your mask when it's as wet as possible, because then you'll get very nice edges, the way that paint will kind of slump down, whereas if you leave it a long time and then remove it, you'll get a sort of horrible seam, and that is it just doesn't look very good when it comes to things like gilding. You know, you'll have a really sort of harsh edge that doesn't look very nice. So yeah, anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with brown for the name, because I want this, it's a nice retro font and I want to kind of make this a retro piece. So the colours are going to be brown, gold and white. The white is going to be the entire surrounding bit. So I won't do the whole thing in real time because it might be a little bit boring, but what I'm doing here is yeah, as I paint a bit, I'm then going to remove it. Well, not instantly, but you know, quite quickly. So what I'm doing is everything up to that outer outline. So I'm going to do the same colour. I did a few mock-ups while I had the digital design up, and I thought it looked really nice having it was brown with the brown outline. So that's what I'm going with. So if I just do a little bit, I probably should have started with the N because it's an individual letter. But yeah, just applying this thick, but you know, not slapping it on, because I don't want that paint when it does slump to sort of spread. So it's all right. If I give it a good 5 or 10 minutes, that'll still be absolutely fine to remove. And one thing I don't need to worry about, and for those of you who aren't familiar with asphaltum or Brunswick black, you're probably thinking, well, what about all the black you put on over that acid? And the beauty of this as a product as well, of the asphaltum anyway, is that white spirit dissolves it. So, you know, this, obviously, your enamel, you can clean while it's wet, you can use white spirit, but once it's dry, white spirit isn't going to touch that. But with the asphaltum, that could be on there for years, and then if you apply a white spirit to it, that's just going to dissolve. So it's a really handy thing. That's why it's such a nice thing to use as a mask, because you know, no matter how intricate you've got to be, at the end, when you've got to rinse that away, you haven't got to do any kind of scrubbing, you haven't got to do anything accurate, you just soak it in a bath of white spirit, and yeah, and that will just slowly go away with a sort of ever so gentle rub with a cloth. So yeah, but what I'll do, I'll probably speed this bit up because it'll be a little bit boring you watching me paint this in real time, but I can use the little centre of this A as an example of what I'm going to do with the rest of it, because that's a sort of little standalone bit, it doesn't matter. So what I'll do is, using my knife, make sure you've got relatively decent blade in there. Just going to do a little slice through that. I haven't done the greatest job of that. There we go. That's not the tidiest, but I can clean that up after with a blade. But really, that's the process, that's what I'm going to do. So I'll do the rest of it in a time lapse. Right, firstly, apologies for the jump forward in progress. I didn't realise that my camera ran out of battery while I was doing that time lapse, but I didn't do anything different on the outside than on the inside. I basically just painted that white and then took away the little bit of vinyl to make the sharp line. So I've left this to dry for a couple of days just to be double sure, because I'm going to be using white spirit, and while white spirit isn't going to affect dry enamel, it will affect it if it's even slightly tacky. So I'm 100% certain that this is completely dry. And now I just want to remove all of the Brunswick black. And I'll do that. I've just created a little sort of border with vinyl, just so that the white spirit I don't have to use loads of it and it keeps pouring off down the sink. So I'm just going to pour that on there, let that spread over, and then leave that to sit for a bit. But while that's sitting, it's sort of dissolving the top layer of the asphaltum. So if I just rub that, you see already that's coming off. You can see that's made a little bit of a gap in there. So this sink is not flat. That's a bit better. Right, and I will need to use more white spirit than I've put on here. But for now, I'm just gonna go with that. Keep rubbing. I'll do it over the white. That might be a bit more visible. I don't know why I didn't do that to start with. And you can see, although it's called Brunswick black, it's actually the darkest of browns, and it's a lovely sort of rich brown. But when it's diluted, you can get some really nice sort of. You mix it to get sort of antique effects in the paint. Looks really good, but that's for another time. You can see that's coming away nice and easily, and I've put this on thick, so this isn't going to be a 2-minute job. You're going to have to maybe do this for 10 minutes and rub it away, apply another load of white spirit. But you can see that when that's on the white, that sort of nice brown colour. So that is literally it. I mean, I wouldn't, even though I'm confident about the white spirit not affecting my enamel, I wouldn't go just rubbing it where you don't need to. So I'm really sort of focusing on the areas that are just the sort of Brunswick black. And yeah, I'll just carry on with that, and then we'll come back to the video once I've cleared it all. Right, so I'm really happy with how that acid etching's turned out. Not sure how well that shows up on here, but what I'm going to do now is apply gold leaf to the etched areas, and I'm going to run through this just in time lapse because I've done numerous gilding tutorials. So I'll put a link to those in the top corner, and I'll put a link in the description as well. But what I'm going to do, I'm not just going to do this as a one solid colour, because there's some really nice patterns in here. I'm going to gild the whole thing with 23 karat gold, and then once that's all dry and burnished, I'm going to seal that gold with some enamel on the sort of patterns of the mandala flower that are on here. Then I'm going to rub that gold away and apply 12 karat white gold. So there's a little bit of a difference between some of the nice little patterns. Anyway, I'm going to do the rest of the video as a time lapse, and I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you have, please subscribe to the channel, click the little thumbs up icon, and share the video with anyone else who you think might enjoy it. So anyway, let's see how it turns out.